All right, we are recording. Yeah, so how's it been? How are things with the inner fire and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, it's been a journey this summer, man, because in some ways we've been reinventing just what that podcast, what the community for it looks like, and then on a personal level, welcoming a new child into the world throws your personal life into an inner fire of sorts too. So it's been kind of a crucible, but a lot of really good stuff, obviously, too. So it's I don't even know where to start with all of it, honestly, because it's definitely felt like a lot. Maybe that's the place to start, is that when there's so many moving parts, it's tough to get your bearings straight.
Yeah, and that's been something that, when our daughter was born, I did the dumb thing. I started a business. And it was like, oh yeah, I don't have sleep. Let's make really long life decisions.
At least you got something to do while you can't sleep, right? So
Exactly. And that was the thing. Everyone was telling you, try to get sleep while you're, when the baby's sleeping, you should be sleeping. It was like, no, I can't sleep. It doesn't really work.
It doesn't always. At some point, you get so exhausted that you can't help but sleep while they're asleep, but it takes a while to get there, and then your body kicks into some weird overdrive, and you never quite get it back, but that's okay.
I definitely get that. Let's do this, just because we are recording and we're hoping to make a podcast episode of this. Why don't you let everyone know a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Andrew, and I live in Colorado Springs, in the center of America, God's country, some might say, because we're about as close as you get to the Rockies without actually being in them. So the view from pretty much everywhere in town is just insane. And I run a podcast called The Happy Hearthstone, which is the longest running Hearthstone podcast. It's a very community centric, podcast. There are obviously like more podcasts today than ever before, but one of the things that I love that's really unique about it, which actually you and I share, KJ, is kind of the format that, I'm the only, concurrent host on the show, and then I get a bunch of different people from the community to come on and get a bunch of, for the sake of very different perspectives. So that's one big thing I think we have in common for the conversations that we're creating and stuff. Mine is really an open invitation for anybody who just enjoys the game and wants to have a conversation about something around it. And so we get people who have never been on a podcast or gotten behind a mic professionally or even semi-professionally. I don't know if we can call it professionally, but yeah, so it's it very much is like just get people together, get very different perspectives, and talk about the one thing that we all have in common, which is that game. And then in my full-time job, I do digital marketing for a book and curriculum publisher here in town. And I've been technically a digital marketer for just over 2 years now. Before that, I actually have a ministry background. I worked for churches and different ministries across the country and ended up in roles where I did a lot of communication things, because communication's kind of always been my forte. And that ended up taking forms of writing emails or doing social media and stuff like that. So when we were moving back to Colorado, I saw this role for a digital marketer and thought, well, I kind of have done that. And they were willing to take a chance on me. And now I'm just kind of continuing to learn that sphere and everything.
Taking chances on people is something that I wish more people could say. I feel like there's such an opportunity to bring in people from non-traditional backgrounds. I come from a non-traditional background, as far as development goes and marketing, because I am technically an e-commerce specialist, but my job nowadays is more I always tell people it's like one of two things, your choice. It's either marketing for developers or development for marketers. It's kind of your choice. I do both sides of that coin. But one of the things that you mentioned is that the Happy Hearthstone podcast is the oldest podcast. And I know you're the third Hearthstone podcast host that I've had on the show. Shout out to Wicked Good and Ridiculous Hat for, coming onto the show and being so awesome. And I know those are two people in your community as well. But the Happy Hearthstone podcast wasn't originally your idea. You kind of adopted that role. Go into detail about how you came into that position.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool story, actually. So the guy who founded the podcast, his name was Josh Augustine, and he started it. He had been thinking about doing a podcast for a while. He'd been a big game aficionado. I think at the time he was working. I think it was EverQuest. I think he was working on their game design side. And so big time gamer, full-time role, all that kind of stuff. And had always been a huge Blizzard fan, especially World of Warcraft. So when they announced Hearthstone, way back when, I think it was 2014, somewhere around there. No, that's way too early. I have no clue when it was, so my apologies. But when they announced it, he got on a mic that day, I think, or maybe the day after, and just decided, I'm going to try and be one of, if not the first. Technically, he wasn't the first. Some guy got on their phone and recorded a 2-minute segment or something and beat him to it on an RSS feed. But he got on and they didn't end up really doing anything. So he couldn't say he was the first technically, but he could say that he was the longest running. So he started the show. Everything that I said about having the community involved and having different people on the show, that's kind of what he had always wanted. And so I started playing Hearthstone back in, I want to say it was 2000. You can tell how good I am with time frames. It was 2014 for sure. So the game actually probably was 2013. It was released. Anyway, 2014 I started playing and just fell in love with the game very quickly. I didn't have any friends who played the game. And so what do you do when you have a passion for something and no one else around you does? You go and find a podcast. And the Happy Hearthstone was actually one of the ones I started listening to and really enjoyed it. Heard that he had an open mic invitation and thought, well, I've done public speaking stuff for a while. I actually majored in audio production in college and did some radio stuff. So I thought, well, I'm not the least qualified person to ever get on there. So maybe he'd have me. So I asked him if I'd come on the show. He said, sure. I went on and did an episode, I think it was 45 or something like that on the show, and had a great time. And then it was somewhere a little less than a year later, I had enjoyed it so much that I thought, man, it would be really cool to start something like that. And through an even longer story, ended up meeting a couple of other players who really wanted to start a Hearthstone podcast too. And we started one called Villains Chosen, which is still around today. I did that for about a year and a half. And then randomly, Josh Augustine sends me an email and says, hey, this is really weird. I know it's unexpected. I am not going to be able to do the show anymore. And I'm wondering if you'd be interested in taking it over. No pressure or anything like that. We were talking about taking risks. He had me on the show one time and was like, he seemed like he knew what he was doing and he could be really good at this. So I come to find out he actually got a job working at Blizzard, who's the company that makes Hearthstone. They also make World of Warcraft. So he became quest designer for them and just thought it's probably time. I probably shouldn't be doing a podcast about a game that my employer creates. So he passed off the reins to me in 2017, and I started doing the show then. I had to leave my crew at Villains Chosen, but to take on the mantle and carry on the torch for a show that has quite a legacy was huge. And honestly, so much of what the show had always been was why I always listened to it, why I loved it. So it was a very natural handoff in a lot of ways, I think, because Josh and I think similarly about creating content for a community. And, we don't necessarily care about the glitziest polish. We want it to sound good. We want it to be professional, but we care more about the heart behind what's happening. And so that's really been something that's been very important. So yeah, that's kind of the story from there to here. There's even more that happened in my time. The show had been kind of hosted by a podcast network, and that podcast network halted existing. They were very generous and gave me all rights to the show, so I kept doing that. That's where the Patreon came into account, and I continue to try and think creatively about what it means to push the envelope for connecting people, really helping people to grow in the game, because I believe that you have more fun when you know what you're doing in the game. That's not necessarily true of every game, but I think with Hearthstone, you can throw some cards around and have a good time. But if you really know what you're doing and feel confident, there's a level that kind of just harnesses in you that's like, man, I can really do this. And it's that's no small part due to community and due to content and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the Reader's Digest version, or the really long essay. I don't know which, but you asked me that question, I'll go on forever.
Oh no, it was a perfect answer. And you talked about some games are better when you know what you're doing. Yeah, Hearthstone is definitely one of those games. And again, this is a developer podcast. Anyone that's listened to this show knows I don't limit my conversations to just developers. I bring all different folks in to talk about what they're passionate about, because I feel like I'm technically not a developer by trade. So if I'm qualified to lead a developer-focused podcast, then us talking about Hearthstone has to glean something that will benefit the developer community. And I do believe that. But one of the things that you mentioned was the heart behind what's happening. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about the Happy Hearthstone podcast. It's in the name. It's the Happy Hearthstone. It's not the always aggravated at Hearthstone. It's not the, I'm going to throw my phone against the wall Hearthstone.
You don't need me to get there. Trust me.
But it has been a game that I've only been playing for a year now. Not even a year, I don't think. I think I'm like 10 or 11 months into it. I started playing when my daughter was born, around the same time I started a business, because you have all the time in the world for things, right? I know. But the thing that gets me is that the community has been, we'll say, not the happiest. I feel like it goes in swings, and there's a bunch of negativity around it. And I think that happens in a lot of different communities, on a global scale, whether you're talking about, people in a certain leadership position in in the tech role, people, you're talking about social networks with like Facebook and Twitter, and everyone's angry all the time, with those. How are you able to maintain the level of positivity that you have when it seems like the rest of the world isn't as excited as you are about that thing?
That's a great question. One of the short points is, I don't know how familiar you are with like self evaluation, self realization, and like the Strengths Finder tests. But with StrengthsFinder, positivity is actually one of my top 5. So it is just something naturally. And that test tests you for things that are more how you're naturally bent. And positivity is one of the strengths that it doesn't necessarily mean your head is in the clouds. That can be a downside to it. But it does mean that you tend to look at everything and spin it towards something that can at least be beneficial, if not truly good. And so it's kind of a cop-out just to say that, but I think it'd be foolish to not say it, that it is a part of my natural bend. I think one of the things that actually helps, and this might be, or sound counterintuitive, is recognizing that we humans aren't as great as we think we are. And what I mean by that is I hear a lot of people say like, oh man, humans are just naturally good. Like we all want to do good. And there's an element of that I understand. But then I had a toddler, and I didn't have to teach her to tell me no. I didn't have to teach her to tell me that she didn't want to do stuff. I didn't have to teach her how to throw things or how to just behave poorly. some of that maybe she caught on from dad or mom, but a lot of it is stuff that it's like, I don't even know that you've seen that anywhere. And so I think for me, and this goes to a more of a philosophical bend, but I think that we humans tend to actually be at our core pretty selfish. I don't think that's what we all like really want necessarily, but I think it's just naturally part of who we are. We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our clan, our friends, our family, whoever that might be. But ultimately, no one else is going to protect ourselves. And a lot of us, I think, run to things that don't, especially during this day and age, don't necessarily deliver on what they promise. So things like social media, where you can say whatever you want and you will find people who affirm you, and you will find people who just crazily disagree with you. And you will find some level of satisfaction in the people who disagree with you because they don't know and you know. So I think that for me, recognizing that we all have this really present inner demon that just wants to say nothing and no one else matters except for me, and recognizing that never truly fulfills anyone. I don't hear anyone on their deathbed saying, man, I wish I had more money. I wish I was more famous. I wish, it's always about, man, I wish I had spent more time with my loved ones. I wish I had made a difference in the world. Those kind of things. That's all outward and looking towards other people. So I think that that's what really connects us and helps us as humans, is looking towards what's going to help other people. And with a positivity strength in me, being able to share that is a big part. I mean, I don't care what your strengths are. You could be exactly the same personality as myself or KJ. You could be the exact opposite of one of us. But I really believe that every person has inherent value, and that the way that you've been created, the way that you are naturally bent, can be extremely beneficial to the people around you if you learn how to do that. Some people just pick it up naturally. It just flows. Other people, it can be really difficult figuring out, what am I gifted at? How can I actually serve people around me? What do I really want to do? But so for me, it all comes from that core belief, honestly, that creating something that's actually going to connect people, creating something that's going to help people to focus on what's really important. Because even when I think back to just my life in this game of Hearthstone, I don't remember the games where random stuff didn't go my way necessarily. I might remember one crazy one especially. What I really remember are the accomplishments I've had in the game. When I hit that new, high tier, when I really felt like I understood a deck, when my friend watched me do this insane thing, and I think that that's true, in a lot of capacities. So, you say a lot of other communities, there can be a lot of negativity. People can really get, especially in day jobs and stuff, they can really get down on the system, the politics, the leadership, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you look back on jobs and tend to remember the really sweet times, when you had that coding night where you stayed up all night until you figured it out and you finally got that thing. And then boss was really proud of you the next day, or about coworkers that you really jived with and stuff. So, yeah, I know that for sure was a long-winded answer, but it's a really big deal to me. I think it's part of who we are as humans, not necessarily just, man, I want to make this video game thing a better place. But it ends up being that in the niche that I've been able to be a part of, essentially.
As you were talking about having that desire to do something in the world, that made me think of a book that I read a while back, Start by John Acuff.
Oh, I love John Acuff. He's so good.
Yes. and they were talking about he talks about the timeline. And right now I'm just on the Amazon page, and here's in the description, it says your 20s are a period of learning. Mm-hmm. This is where you try 1,000 things, explore a multitude of interests, and discover what really motivates you. And then your 30s are a period of editing. And this is where you sort out your interests, where you discover what you care about and who you really are. Mm-hmm. And then your 40s are a period of mastering. This is the decade of narrowing your focus, honing your skill sets, and becoming an expert in your field. And then your 50s are a period of harvesting, that's where you reap the benefits of all of your hard work. And then your 60s are a period of guiding. And that's where you spend a decade mentoring and training others in their road to success. And the thing that I feel like now is that I think that a lot of that is starting to shift downward. I don't know. I was definitely in a period of learning. I mean, I'm only 29. I'll be 30 in like a month. My 20s were definitely a period of learning, but learning a lot about myself. Again, learning, what motivates me and who I am. And now that I'm in my 30s or about to be in my 30s, I feel like I'm already wanting to get to that level of guiding and helping others at least get to where I am now. And I feel like that's something that, as you're talking about wanting to you're kind of wanting to be that light that the community needs in all reality. And full disclosure for anyone listening, I actually support the Happy Hearthstone podcast. And the reason I do that isn't because it's a Hearthstone podcast. It's because, what Andrew's doing on his show is creating a source of joy in a community that has been struggling to find it. It seems like it almost has like a junkie mentality of, okay, we just got that expansion. Life sucks until I get the next expansion. And then I'm good for like a week and a half. And then life sucks again until the next expansion. And you really are able to put things into perspective. Do you feel like, and I don't know how old you are. You don't have to tell me, but do you feel like you were in that period of learning or editing in your life and with this podcast?
100%. Yeah. I'm only a few years down the road from you, not many at all. One thing that came to mind though, when you were talking about how things are moving down, is that though your 60s, I mean, from what I can tell, it seems like as you get older, you kind of take on this sage role, I've heard it called also, where you're able to really instruct other people and help them to overcome things that they might not be able to see on their own. I really believe that there's an element of that to everyone, that we always have something to offer the people right behind us, essentially. So you think about the high schooler mentoring the junior higher. The high schooler has barely a brain. I don't know about you, but for me, I had no clue what I was doing in high school, and I didn't have much. But the truth is, even when you're in high school, you have something to offer because you made it through junior high, and especially if you had a heart to help out other students, other guys, other girls, other people who are going through that really difficult phase, just being able to relate and say, man, I remember when this happened to me. It helps someone not to feel like they're the only one. And so, I think that we all have something to offer one another, but it's a pretty common thing that age-wise, the generation that's just older has something to offer the people coming in right behind them. To even say, because of the proximity they have to those times, here's what I can see and say. Now I can tell you, I have, perspective on my high school years now that I'm 10 plus years removed from that I didn't have right out of it also. So that it kind of does get more and more valuable, but there's also a relatability that a high schooler has with a junior high that you and I might not have necessarily. So we all have something to offer. I feel like, I was really blessed that I got to take on this podcast and it be such a natural fit. Not everyone gets that opportunity. So I feel an even greater responsibility, honestly, to innovate, to create things that are still in spirit with what the show has always been, but things that can create new opportunities that haven't necessarily existed. So we all have to think that with any measure of success or failure that we have, because that honestly is the definition of editing. It sounds like, where we're taking away the things that didn't work, we're learning from the things that do, and we're continuing to go, and hopefully improve as we continue.
Definitely. And even with that kind of takes me, I guess, to the last topic of the official podcast. We still have an after show to get to, which is going to be a blast. But you mentioned that the podcast at one point was being taken care of by a larger network. Mm-hmm. You had people that I don't know the full details of the arrangement, but I would assume that you had people that would look at sponsors, or you had people that would look at even just covering hosting costs.
Right.
When that disappeared, instead of saying, well, funding's gone for it, best of luck. It was the longest running podcast. Now it's done. You decided to start trying to reach back to the community and see if the community themselves would arise to the cause and continue to lead this thing. And obviously, we talked like as you were, getting the inner fire going and some of this stuff was happening. Right. But I wonder what gave you the courage to reach out to the people who enjoy listening to you and say, look, this thing doesn't come for free. It comes with a cost, and it's a very literal cost. There's a monetary cost to this. There's also a time cost. As I do more editing for other podcasters and for content creators, I start to realize, like, I spent all yesterday evening, like, I was taking care of my daughter up until bedtime, and then after that I was editing podcasts until 1 a.m. And it's
a
like
grind, fan.
I would so much rather just be sleeping, than necessarily listening to someone else's audio. But at the same time, I understand that if I want to see my company get to where I want to see it, it comes at a cost. And you were able to effectively communicate that to your audience. What did you do? And again, what gave you the confidence to even ask?
I think it started with kind of that harebrained thought of, I wonder if this is even possible, and the best business ideas start as wonderings. I wonder what would happen if this product existed, if I created a restaurant like this, whatever that might be. And so I knew and listened to several other podcasts that did it, that had at least some amount of income that covered their costs or even created some amount of profitability for them. And so I thought, well, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants because I didn't create this thing. Much of that audience building and stuff had happened before me. So if now people are enjoying what they're listening to, maybe there's a chance that they would want to get involved. And I really legitimately did not know what to expect. But I thought, I'll always wonder if I don't do this. To be frank, there wasn't a lot of room to go down, essentially. Because
that's the best place to be.
It really is. I had nothing to lose at that point because the podcast network covered a lot of the mechanical things that I hadn't known up until that point, and they covered the cost of hosting it, but that was kind of it, pretty much. And so they were great to work with, and I loved being able to do that. But in a way, when they decided to shut their doors and were generous to give me room to breathe on it, it created new roads of opportunity that said, I think that I could actually do more now. And so a big thing for that, I went down the road of Patreon, of creating a place where people could give different amounts. But one thing that was really important to me from the very beginning was that it was more than just a tip jar, essentially. And for some people and some of the shows that I support, that I'm not able to really give much. And I get that everyone's at different places. But what I thought is, if I can actually create true value for other people, then even if I can just help a few people with that, great, And I was blown away that in the first day, I think the costs of the podcast were taken care of, and we were well on our goal, because the show had always been every other week up until then. And people had always asked for weekly episodes and stuff. And I thought, well, if you guys want to make this worth my time and make it not as hard of an ask to my wife, honestly, to go jump in the closet once, every single week, essentially, to record a show, then we could do it. And the community rallied around that and really wanted to do it. And so, that's it has to start with seeing what's possible. And I brought up strengths finders before. I guess that's a big thing to take away is if you don't know yourself, then you don't know how to leverage what's in you naturally to do what you want to do. We can't all do the same things, but we are all capable of great things, I believe. And so for me, knowing that I think strategically and I think futuristically, I can see what may not yet exist, but what could exist. And so I said, let's do this. And honestly, if no one had jumped in, I would have been perfectly fine with that. And I would have said, the show's going to keep going exactly the same way it's been. I'm going to enjoy it and it's going to be great. But my call to arms really was, if you guys want to see more of this stuff, if you want to see more of me, here's the practical road for how we can get there. Because I'm giving what I can give now, but I'd love to create more, and we can do that together. So finding the right communication plan for doing that, the right channels for doing it, and then the right means. I've loved being able to create more content and doing a lot of it exclusively for people who are part of the Inner Fire, which is like my inner circle, essentially. Doing some coachings here and there, and doing what else? I actually have even more in the in the works right now, but I'll keep that on hush. But yeah, lots of good stuff essentially for those people. It seems like it's really been a good fit. And if they're enjoying the positivity, if they're enjoying somebody who creates stuff that's more about enjoying and growing, then we keep connecting with each other, and world's a better place a little bit, and that's worth it.
I love it. And I remember when I subscribed, like that feeling that I had, like I had to, I had to talk to my wife about it. I was like, so look, I want to do this thing. It's not the cheap, because I mean, that's the thing is like, I tell people like, there's, one of my favorite Bible verses is a man's worth his wages, sure. Yeah. And that's something that I believe in. And I know that the podcast that we're talking on right now, the podcast that has been running on and off for 5 years now, that has helped developers. I sat on the phone with a developer last night, a member of the community, a premium member of the community, someone that gives their money to continue seeing this happen. And the thing that they said was, your voice, your attitude on this industry is something that we need more of. And I have to agree, which is why when I heard like, okay, hey, Andrew's trying to, raise funds and get this podcast going. I believe me when I say like your voice, your attitude, your take on this industry. And if people listening are upset that we're talking about, a video game, swap out Hearthstone and put in whatever you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need more positive oriented, like we need more positivity focused discussion on the things that we're passionate about, because if we don't have those things, eventually they'll no longer become passions. Mm-hmm. They'll be chores. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but I don't like doing chores. and I mean, that's the thing with most video games, with most career changes. It gets to a point where, in the words of Marie Kondo, it no longer sparks joy.
That's right.
Like, and I think to myself, like, in my worst day, would I still want to go home and do this? And the answer is not always yes. I mean, that's obvious. But if I can't remember the last time that I wanted to do something, then I understand that there's a problem. And what I've noticed lately is that doesn't happen because we get tired of it. It happens because we get worn down by all the negativity associated with the thing that's around it. So I say all of that to thank you so much again for being that positive voice, for being that beacon of excitement and joy, and for allowing me to use my coaching time to do this podcast. So
well, it's my pleasure because we've been meaning to do it for a long time. But honestly, man, if one person is telling you, like the guy who's giving to this podcast told you last night, that your voice matters, that there's purpose in it, that it's creating conversation or thought that is beneficial, then I know you don't need me to tell you this, but it's all worth it, you know? And I think that if you're in a place, if you're listening to this now and you aren't hearing that from somebody, don't take it as a diss to you that you can't do it. Take it as a spark of encouragement to say, what can you do that can lead to that? I recently went through the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is just an insanely challenging book for every human being. And one of the big points in there, one of the habits is beginning with the end in mind. If you want to make an impact on somebody, you have to think 5 steps ahead to what you want that end product to look like, and then walk your way back and think through, how can I get there? Because it may be as simple as being kinder to a coworker. It may be as simple as taking ownership of a project that you know no one really wants to do. It might be as simple as coming home and actually doing those chores for your spouse or loved one because you know it's going to make a difference for them. But regardless, you have to take some steps to move towards that. You don't receive those words that are honestly more fuel for the fire. So thank you for that. But you don't get there without creating, doing, acting. And so choose one small thing that you can act towards today, whether it's in your industry or with somebody that you love. And make a difference, because we're all capable of great things, and it very rarely happens just because we were sitting on the couch watching Netflix. Not that that's a bad thing, but it happens more often when we say, you know what, I'm going to do this, I'm going to think through it, and I'm going to make the world a better place.
Andrew, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Before we wrap up and jump into our after show, let everybody know how they can find out more about the Happy Hearthstone podcast and all the things that you're doing.
Definitely. So you can, if you do like the world of Hearthstone, please come and hang out at thehappyhearthstone.com, or you can search in whatever podcast app you're listening to right now for the Happy Hearthstone and it'll pop up. You can follow me on Twitter at Andrew is Living, which I'm normally sharing either Hearthstone-related things or the latest brewery that I've been to, because I do like a good local brew, or honestly mountain scenarios. I may be a little bit more indoorsy, but I do live in a place where it's beautiful outside. So, and yeah, that's really most of it for now.
Awesome. Well, I got to give my spiel at the end of this. So, as Andrew said, your voice matters. And that is what Pitt has been about. You know, when we first started the podcast, back in like 2014 or something like that. I think it was 2014 when the podcast first started. The tagline was helping people in tech be more productive. And we very quickly changed that to helping people in tech be more. And we realized that while the show is called Productivity in Tech, it's more about having that positive feeling, that ability to say, I can do a thing. Not that I should or shouldn't do a thing, but I have the ability to. And providing the community with practical advice to do that. And if you're listening to this podcast once a week and you're getting that little dosage of positivity and motivation, and you want more of that, we have ways that you can do that. You can come and be a member in our Slack channel. Now, we're actually going to be trying something new. If you know anything about Pitt, we're always trying new things. The Slack channel is going to be closing to new applicants at the end of the month. So right now, we're recording this on the 20th. It's going out on the 21st. So you have 9-10 days to join the Slack channel. And there's a reason why we're closing it, because we're about to do a bunch of thinking, scheming, figuring out, building to create a community that works for its community members. So if you want to be a part of that, if you want to get that dopamine hit of encouragement and excitement, you absolutely have to go to productivityintech.com, sign up for the newsletter, and when the newsletter comes out later this week, it's going to have a link that invites you to the Slack channel. If you do not do that, I cannot guarantee that you will be able to join. So if you want that, go productivityintech.com. On the front page, the newsletter field's right there. It's the biggest thing you can see. Sign up today. And of course, if you are doing something and you need some help with that, if you're doing a podcast, if you're doing video content, if you're trying to write in your blog, if you're trying to do newsletter marketing, or you just have an app and you want to help tell the world about it, then consider becoming a client of Productivity in Tech. One of the things that we focus on is helping get that message across. And we don't do it in a way that is cheap or inauthentic. We look at who the audience is. We look at who the presenter is. And we make your voice, we amplify it. You know, a lot of people talk about when you're editing, you're modifying things. We're not trying to modify your voice or what your message is. We're just trying to amplify it so that your community gets the best of you possible. Again, all of that information, productivityintech.com. And we do have premium memberships, but I've already done enough proselytizing right now. So I am going to now thank the people that helped make this podcast a reality. Thank you to Nadira Mawali for the use of his music, A Hustler in Spite of Myself, for the intro and outro music. Thank you to Icon Pro Audio for the generous donation of audio equipment. If you've noticed that it sounds better, let me know, because they want to know. And of course, thank you to all of the premium members at productivityintech.com. Go to the website, click the memberships button for more information on that. And for myself, or Andrew, and for Productivity in Tech, I am Jay Miller. I hope we have been productive. I'm not even going to say I hope. I know we've been productive. But now, we are off to the after show.